more good.
Alice Newport,
Thirsty?
James
Drink
B.
better.
Beam Distilling,
Yes.
ambassador for Australia and New Zealand, sitting as part of the Club Suntory, the Suntory Oceania team. Thanks for taking some time to join us on the old More Good Drinks podcast. It feels like it's taken a little bit of time to get this conversation together, but I am really excited to have it because you've been in the business for a while. You've got strong relationships on both sides of the Tasman, but I always think those long, wordy, here's your job title on a business card or otherwise introductions are a little bit meaningless. So I'll pose it to you as a way of introducing yourself to the audience. When
Yes.
someone asks you at a dinner party, hey, Alice, what is it that you do? How do you actually describe your role?
I mean, I think I often say that I probably have the best job in the world, which I think sounds a bit corny, but my job is pretty amazing. But I guess if I was to drill it down, I would say that I look after Jim Beam and our amazing brands for Australia and New Zealand, and that I work across community and engagement and education and what I do, and I guess what we all do as part of the Club Suntory team is we build communities through the amazing brands and the amazing experiences that we're lucky to be able to have and produce. And I'm aware that was not one sentence. I feel like that'll be a theme. I'm nothing but concise, you know. But no, I would say that I look after kind of education and community for, I guess, Jim Beam, the world's #1 bourbon, which honestly is, I often pinch myself for how awesome the job is.
So how has that changed over time for you? Because, you know, like I think about maybe 10 years ago in the advocacy space, community and engagement and education were certainly, you know, good ideas, but they weren't necessarily the first things that we'd talk about when it comes to, you know, that role of sitting in an ambassador team. So how's it changed for you over time?
I mean, so I've been doing this for about a decade now. I've been with Jim Beam for 3 years. It was 3 years about a week ago. Happy birthday to me. And before that, I worked for another big brand and I did some other small stuff previously. And I think you find that, I mean, as advocacy in itself has definitely grown. Like, you can't just walk into a bar and be like, here, taste this liquid, and suddenly you have advocates all over the world anymore. I think it's a lot more nuanced, and I think trade want a lot more from us, which is great. But I'm very lucky in my role because my role is purely advocacy rather than part of my role being to kind of go out and physically have those commercial conversations. You know, we have a really strong commercial team that does that. So we get to kind of work harmoniously together as the two functions. But I think when I first started, a lot of BA roles were hybrid. And I think that, you know, that key point was just that education first. And, you know, there was a lot of, I guess, parties and, you know, that type of stuff. Whereas I think now what we do is, it is really about kind of building ambassadors in bars. It's about equipping trade, people in retail, you know, even consumers with skills and understanding rather than just falling in love with the liquid. And I really love that that's a very strong pillar of what we do. Is obviously education is key and giving people that understanding of the liquid, but it's also about helping, I guess, the trade educate themselves, whether it's about, you know, knife skills or, you know, menu creating or fermentation. You know, Reed just did this epic Nature's the Maker piece with makers, and you know, it's about also like upskilling the trade too. I think that's one of the ways that we, you know, the wider industry too, creates, I guess, the next level of ambassadors in the bar for our brands is through that kind of upskilling, but also allowing them to be part of a wider community. Yes.
So what's the real, like, talk to me a little bit about, like, what's the real work of building community in this kind of ambassador role now?
For me, I think it's about creating like a very authentic space. You know, you bring people together and, you know, sometimes it might be because they've all applied to be part of a program, or, you know, they've been handpicked, or they've all shown up at an event, or whatever it may be. But I think it's about demonstrating that like our connection to the brand and our connection to trade are real. And I think that very much creates the space that allows trade to connect to each other and then connect back to us. And it becomes like this really beautiful cycle of I guess, of authentic connection. And that's what builds a community. And whether it's allowing somebody to put their hand up in a session and feeling like they can say, I don't understand, or can you explain this, or why is it done this way? And I think creating programs that allow people to do that. Like that fosters a sense of safety and security, which I think is a really beautiful step into building a community.
There's many parts of the job. There's one part which is kind of like that traveling salesperson, that has a like, here's a magic case and here's a magic bottle and here's a magic other bottle. In my mind, I think about it more as translation. That you play a key role in translating the distillery experience and the brand experience to actually what bartenders are doing day to day in hospitality. And then also bringing that bartender closer to the consumer and to the drinker and the person that's, as you say, it's that multiplication of ambassadors, creating ambassadors. Which part resonates for you? Which end of the spectrum is where you most come alive?
I'm very lucky. Like I love hosting a masterclass for consumers, and as much as I do with trade, but I think for me it is that point of trade that really does make me come alive. Like when I can see, like I start my sessions off and I always ask who doesn't like bourbon, because there's always one, and I just make it my mission to make sure that they fall in love with something, whether it's a story, whether it's a liquid, whether it's a drink, or whether they just feel more comfortable with the part of the category that they don't really understand. So that's I think very much the part that makes me come alive, because it's the best thing, like seeing somebody walk into a room and thinking that they don't like something and then walking out and them feeling an attachment to it. I think that's a really beautiful thing that not everybody gets to do. So I would say, and as I can see myself on screen, like that made my face come alive. So I would say it's definitely that bit.
Which are the hard parts, particularly when it comes to working with bartenders? I always think in some respects, it's a tough industry because you're constantly meeting people and trying to establish that trust quickly in order to
Yes.
pass on education. What's the hardest thing to teach bartenders, but you're still keeping on trying?
Whiskey's for women too.
Is it really? Is it's
Yes.
still a thing?
And I think,
Yeah.
I think so. I think there is a misconception still, very, very sadly, that, certain whiskies are for women or certain whiskies are for men, certain beers are for men. And I think that is changing over time. And I think there's junior bartenders, and, I'm not talking about being like in the middle of every big city. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think if I walk down the road and I go to insert cocktail bar here, the people that work there aren't going to think that because they're already on their journey. But I work with, I don't just work with cocktail bars. I work with, that's the beauty of, I guess, what I do with Jim Beam is I get to work with the whole spectrum of the industry. So I think with a lot of junior bartenders who haven't been around, especially spirits, there is still a little bit of that misconception, but that just means I've got something to really teach somebody. And then one day they'll realize that there is a whiskey for them and they'll love it. And do you know what I mean? And I think that's, I guess, converting people in that space is kind of chef's kiss when you take away that sad misconception and you give somebody a different realization. That's a really beautiful moment. Jim Beam, if I didn't drink whiskey, I'd be in the wrong job. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. What's something that you think the industry is still kind of quietly just getting wrong right now, or the things that you're wanting to challenge and push people on in that education space?
I mean, look, obviously there's obviously a lot going on in the industry, that especially when it comes to women and safety, and so obviously I think there's still a very large way to grow in that space. There's a lot of work to do still. And there are people that are, speaking out and they are commenting on things. And I think you are starting to see a bit of a societal shift in that space. We're starting to see the fact that I started to like milk punches, which I never thought would ever happen. But from like a societal piece in the industry, I think we're starting to see, people prioritizing rest and health. I think we've started to move away from that almost semi-toxic, like the bar is your family. And that, you have to do the grind and, all of those things. And I think we are starting to see a little bit of a move away from that. I think we're seeing bartenders drinking less, and, that also then spurs on the way menus are created. And then, I think if bartenders are drinking less and they think more about less boozy drinks, which obviously continues to add to like the not out conversation or the, no or low and, those types of things. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. Like I've been in the industry for longer than I would like to admit, and I'm not going to admit how long it's been. But even me, myself, like, like I had to start going to the gym because my knees are screwed. And do you know what I mean? So like even as somebody that's not in service every day, I think the way people are responding to their bodies is different, and I think they're listening to it. And I think people are also really starting to talk about mental health and safe spaces. And, there's Mix House, for example, which is a not-for-profit organization about empowering women and female identifying non-binary members of the industry. It's based out of WA. Shout out to Pip and Shirley, founded by two amazing powerhouse women in WA. They do a lot of stuff that's not just about like community, but it's about mental health and it's about awareness and those types of things. And I think we're getting much better at that space, which is a really beautiful thing to see. Yes.
There is, I think, a different generation of bartenders that are starting to come up through. And
Yes.
is there anything that you think, oh, maybe there's a risk we lose something? Is it a pendulum swing or are we moving into balance?
No, I think there has been like a woomph on one side, which, but I think, so many people that are, they're starting out in their career and they might be, let's say 18, 19, right? They didn't grow up around alcohol and venues in the same way that we did. Like, you had drinks at a house party and then you did like at school and then at uni and, you lived in dorms or, whereas a lot of these kids, a lot of these young adults, whatever, they started uni in COVID in their house.
Mm.
They haven't had that kind of introduction to finding out, like, what they enjoy drinking or how they like, those interactions. So they're still learning those things. And I think that also has an impact on, like, the grind used to be such a big thing. Like you leave last and you show up first and it doesn't matter how you feel. And, you never call in sick no matter how ill you are, even though that will then in turn get your teammates sick. There used to be that, like, no, you have to show up. And I think that's a really good thing of like being able to say, no, I can't come in because I don't want to make you or our guests sick. Do I think that yeah, and I think we will swing back to the middle where people understand that, and in fairness, I don't manage venues, like, so I don't see it all the time. But I think we will have a balance of people realizing that it is okay to push yourself sometimes.
Mm.
But I think you also see like the industry in itself is knackered, man. So I think also in like senior leaders, you're starting to see them be like, okay, well, I need to take a break. I'm allowed to take holidays, or like I've done my back in. I'm not going to lift this box because you don't want to teach somebody else to do that. And so I think that's a positive thing that we're seeing. And I know that there probably was an extreme on one end at one point, but I do feel like we've come back a bit now.
Mm. Mm.
Yes.
One of the curious questions that emerged in a conversation the other day is how, as you referenced, there's a huge amount of social education and learning that goes on about building confidence in yourself to start a conversation with a stranger, finding common ground in small talk. Lots of those experiences that you have in the first few years of university or when you're out from, high school. And we were commenting on there's a in some places, there's a noticeable gap in the development of some of those just small talk, outgoing social skills that, we all kind of learn by bumping up against strangers in all manner of places.
Yes.
And it's really interesting watching a younger generation catch up on some of those things and where there's enormous confidence and skills in one side and then, almost a really in some instances like a naive kind of insecurity about how do I go about this, managing upfront customer relations and conversations in a bar.
Yeah, and I think also, like, as a society, we're pretty mean right now.
Mm.
I was talking to somebody in a bar, I don't know, the other day, with somebody I'd met through a friend of a friend. We're just sitting having a drink, and we were talking about his kids and about how he's trying to make sure that at no point is he ever rude to anybody. Like, if he's going through the McDonald's drive-through, you can hear people being so angry at the poor person behind the tannoy or whatever it's called. And he just wants to make sure that he never ever does anything like that because he doesn't want to teach anybody that that's okay. And I think as a society, we're a bit, our tempers can be shorter than I think they've ever been before,
Mm.
mine included. I'm definitely not an angel. I know when my rope is short, and I think that makes it a little bit scarier to kind of walk up and be like, to have those harder conversations in a service role. And also, we all, the way we interact with people is so different. You don't just walk up to somebody in a bar and say, hey, I'm Alice, should we have a drink? Gone are the days of passing like I guess like a phone number on a napkin. Do you know what I mean? So I think, yeah, and I really hope, I think people will start to come back in person more.
Mm.
And people will learn those skills again. But it is challenging. I was listening to a podcast the other day about communication and just, about open, especially in like a small talk and networking environment. There's such a difference of saying, where are you from? And me turning around and saying Bedford, or me saying from the UK, I immigrated when I was 18. I moved to Perth and I've had both, and that sparks such a bigger conversation rather than it just being like a one word answer either way. And I think that's the stuff that in the service industry and especially across bars, you learn to do those things because you're trying to make your guests feel comfortable. And I think I think that's probably what could be missing a little bit for some people.
Mm-hmm. It's just we're teaching the art of small talk once again, right?
Yeah, and I think, everybody hates small talk, but everybody hates small talk because it's boring. If you're
Mm,
actually good at small talk, it's not small talk, it's the opening into a conversation, which isn't small talk
mm-hmm.
because normal small talk sucks.
Normal small talk is trying to start your car when your spark plugs are dead.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy.
It just came to me right then, and I was like, "It's that, it's that."
I'm like, write that down. But no, but you're right, it is. And it's like it's a false start at all times. Unless you get somebody that is either, that is a good conversationalist or you have a new connector there. And yeah, I think it's nice to know that I could talk the ear off anybody, in fairness. I'm literally on a podcast. But, having that, I guess, understanding and also that caring point, you're not just asking questions to get to a certain point. Asking those questions and because you want to have a conversation because you are actually interested.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. And that I think is a tone that is changing because I mean, I remember a time where it wasn't uncommon that you'd walk into a bar and what you got back across the bar was yes, welcoming and yes, it was friendly, but it was also lots of bants. Like it was a lot of banter, it was a lot of cheek, it was a lot of sass, it was a lot of, I'm gonna get and that is, we just you don't want to do that anymore because, as you say, society's a little mean right now. So banter doesn't necessarily offer the same warm and
No,
opening welcome
not
that once upon a
necessarily,
time it
no.
does.
Yes. And obviously that depends in the venue that you're in, right? But I think who was I talking to? I was talking to somebody, I think probably anyway, about the fact that you can do like service can be very, very serious and still be fun. And I think
Mm.
that's what a lot of venues are doing now is you do have that really fun style of service on top of the serious hospitality. And but you're right, we have to move away from the vulgar bounce that of dive bar past.
I mean, I miss them a little bit, you
So
know?
do I. I mean, I still get them in my friends' bars because they can be as mean to me as I want. That's our love language.
Yeah.
Because I can give it back. You know what I mean?
You talked a little bit about exhaustion and just how exhausted hospitality currently is. And that did used to be, you're absolutely right. It was a sign of dedication and of how hard you were willing to go and that push was about a drive for excellence. It's not dissimilar to that same kind of, work hard, get the stars at no matter what the cost kind of attitude that has been a big part of ancient, hopefully behind us, chef culture. Do you think that industries are actually in a position to be able to address that? And the people that you're working with some of those people who are just now more exhausted than they've ever been before. How do you figure out how do we figure out how to help hospitality navigate that shift in culture and expectation, in a way that doesn't just pile on to the problem?
Look, I think this is like it's a really big question. And
Kind of
I
my
think
specialty.
yes, yeah, this is why I like talking to you. It's just normally done with, a whiskey in hand in Christchurch somewhere. Look, I think the industry will work out how to industry again, for want of to put it very much into layman's terms, right? And I think people have worked out how to work smarter, not harder. I think with such a care, and I'm talking about obviously like high level premium venues here. They have worked out that they really want to they want to give excellent service and they want to do it and they want to keep their teams, they want that longevity and they want that, the happiness of the teams. Because you can see it in somebody's face when they're in a mood, when they walk into a venue. Like you can see it an absolute mile off. And if if your staff aren't happy, your venue's not going to work properly. And I think, you see like when they can venues with more people on shift for that more personalized service, venues that didn't do table service before have kept table service because they've also realized that that hosted experience keeps people in the seat for longer because they feel hosted, right?
I mean,
So
they're salespeople. Like that is, you compound the sale, you add value to the sale, you add
yeah,
weight to the overall experience,
you're trying
which
to,
is about adding value.
you're trying to create
Yeah.
a return consumer, right? And when it
Mm,
boils down to it.
mhm.
And, they're selling our product, but they're also selling their own product. And I think that, the leaders of this industry they're working out how to look after themselves as what, it's, you put your own oxygen mask on first, right? And I think I think people are just really starting to learn how to do that. This is going to take a long time. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to be a quick fix of like, oh, we've worked out that we should walk to work and have a booze-free day. It's a longer play than that. But I think you do start to see people really making that change, which also I think is not sadly, understandably, also about the fact that sadly we're not as young as we used to be.
Well, let's talk a little bit about health, because I want to talk about health and I want to talk about going the distance. So let's start with the category, because you work in a category, I work in a category that's asking us to remind people that it's okay and it's fun to have a drink. And if you're going to have a drink, then it might as well be something that's of great quality that tastes good. But we're doing that at a time when alcohol consumption is just under the tightest scrutiny that it's ever been
Yes.
under, since prohibition, really. And it's not just alcohol consumption, but it's culture around drinking. That's the other part, So previously it was just alcohol is bad. Now it's like alcohol is bad and the way we drink is bad. And so how do you hold the tension in those two things? What is it?
I mean,
How does it work out for you personally?
yeah, I think for me, like, what I love about what I do is that it's not about the drinking, it's about the brands.
Mm,
Like, it's about sharing knowledge and creating those communities. Do you know what I mean? Like, that for me that's what it is about. And I'm very lucky that, I spend time with lots of people that I meet in the industry and we don't drink.
mm,
We go for walks or we cook dinner or we go to the movies, or do you know what I mean? So for me, I think we're bigger than that as
mm,
an entity. Do you know what I mean?
mhm,
I think
mhm,
that then, you now see non-alc menus being such a prevalent part of really, really great cocktail menus, and people that create them not drinking, or, whether they're non-alc drinks or drinks with brands in, or spirits in rather. And I think the industry in itself is starting to tell people that it's okay, which I
mm,
really, really like.
mm,
Yeah, I think it's like I want to be in this industry for a long time, and because I really love it and I think it's a really beautiful thing. But and I think that I guess dichotomy is that for me it is more about it's about that the knowledge and the craftsmanship and all of those beautiful things that go into create the brands that I look after. And I think that's the thing that's incredible. And, whether people are, whether they're drinking one highball or whether they're, cracking a 6-pack of RTDs with their friends, whatever. I think I'm not here to push anything on them. I'm here to talk to them about the brands in the first place.
mm.
We have a saying at Jim Beam, drink it any damn way you please. And that is 100% correct. Do you know what I mean? Like, and if it's half a nip or if it's a bit more, then I'm here for you. But yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the theme that comes through what you're talking about is that it's less about what's in the glass or how many glasses and more about the connection of what's happening around you in that space,
I
which I
think
think
so,
is,
yeah.
you know, how and that's possibly I think in my own perspective, my focus has become more and more on, like, I am a big fan of saying it's not what we're drinking, it's how we're drinking, it is how we're drinking, which is if we're drinking by ourselves, if we're drinking without social connection, if we're drinking without purpose, then those are some of the things that become red flags. But
Completely, I
but
agree.
if the how we're drinking is actually less about the consumption and more about the culture that that we're engaging in, where it's one that's formed of strong social bonds and the opportunity to, have meaningful conversation or interaction that's not just
Yeah.
scrolling 1,000 Instagrams. That for me feels like, yeah, that's a style of drinking that I want to encourage, actually, because it's more about how we form social connection. It kind of takes us back to that whole thing of when we all disappeared into our bubbles
Yes.
and we sat at home, or drinking by ourselves with our housemates or what have you, that perhaps that wasn't so good for us. But now when we go
Yes.
back out into the world, connecting with many different people and coming up against, different experiences and creative inspiration again, maybe that's a healthier way to be doing it.
Yeah, and I think that's why bars and restaurants are so freaking great, is because they provide an avenue and a space for that. Like,
Mm,
like everybody talks about, well, not everybody talks about, sorry, like there's like being a regular at a bar and like knowing people is like it's romanticized in some ways, right? Like, and that's because it's
Making your
being
way in
again,
the world today takes everything you got.
but it's about that kind of being part of and again, for me, I think everything comes back to community. It's about being part of a community where everyone
Mm,
knows your name, where you walk in and, you know, it might be that you sit down and someone's like, sparkling water, right? For you, not for me. Sparkling water is aggressive. I don't understand it. But the people know that. Do you know what I mean? And I
mm,
think that's the really beautiful thing about hospitality and venues is that it gives you a space where you can be you and you can sit and have a delicious soda water with lime if that's what you want to do. It's not prohibitive to you being in the space and in the community.
mm.
Yeah.
I love the idea that hospitality venues are actually, yes, on one level, feeding and watering people, but actually on a higher echelon, hospitality venues now are actually about helping people make those connections
Yeah.
that perhaps they haven't before, or helping them remake connections, and I think about all the times that you go to your neighborhood bistro and how many this great restaurant here in Auckland, Prego, they just celebrated their 40th anniversary, and
Amazing.
right, incredible. And I think, okay, so this is a neighborhood venue in on Ponsonby Road that has been witness to how many like Friday long lunches, birthday
Birthdays,
celebrations,
engagements,
you know,
breakups,
yeah,
all of the
breakups,
things.
all of the things, and they're part of the fabric of that community. And yet, it's not the place necessarily that it's not the place that makes the connections. It's not that, oh yeah, I went to Prago and I got a corner table in the courtyard. It's actually the facilitation of that staff team and that place, which is just
Yeah.
helping you, And I think even the joy of going to a restaurant or going to a venue, going to a bar. I mean, I have a reasonable, I have a decent bar at home, right? But sometimes it's really nice to go out and have somebody else make you a drink, because and not having to think about cleaning up the cocktail shaker, you actually just get to relax a little bit more.
Yeah, like I could sit and make, I don't know, Knob Creek Brooklyn, right? Delicious. My favorite cocktail. I could make that at home. I worked in service for years and years and years, but that's not the point.
Mm,
And I have all the ingredients at home, and I have beautiful shakers and beautiful tins and twirly spoons and all the things. But that's not the point. The point is that you're doing it when you're out and you're in with people. And when I used to live in Perth, there was a place I used to go to, called 309, and I used to write quite a bit. And I would go, if I was ever feeling like not overly positive, I would go and I would sit at the end of the bar and I would drink two Manhattans and I would write. And I would just watch what was happening around me. And it just made me feel grounded. And that's not about the Manhattans. That was not about the writing. It was about being part of something, even if I wasn't really part of it.
It
Yeah.
definitely was not influenced remotely by watching too many episodes of My So-Called Life with Claire Danes in the 90s, right?
No, it definitely was not me thinking that one day if I walk into a dingy nightclub, it might be the Bronze and somebody from Buffy might be there. It was definitely not that.
I nearly used Buffy as an example, but no,
Yes, well, I will always bring Buffy up if I can. So, yeah,
she is the queen. It's so sad that the reboot got cancelled.
don't.
We won't even
Please
talk about it.
don't. Please
Yeah,
don't.
won't even talk
It was
about it.
International Buffy Day in April because it's her birthday, and so obviously I know. And I almost started rewatching it again. I rewatch it once a year at a minimum, but I only finished it in November, so I have to give myself a little bit of a break because I can't. It gets too much. Too much.
Honestly, such a metaphor though for
Yeah.
cultural change. But that's a different podcast.
Anyway, yes,
We'll save that for when we're sitting at the bar with our journals and our Manhattans.
yes, perfect. Thank you. Yeah,
But so if you were to estimate take an estimate on like how many days do you think you spend traveling a year?
I think last year I was away for about 5 months, roughly. And I mean,
Okay.
I'm coming back to Sydney in and out in between that, but like I'm
Mm.
on the road solidly for about 5 months of the year.
So like 150 nights, give or take.
Yeah, I haven't done the math because I'm a words girl, not a maths girl. But yes, and I am quite lucky because, when I go to Perth, my mum's there, so I can stay with her. And
Mm.
I lived in Brisbane, so a lot of it for me is like feeling like I'm coming home. But that also doesn't mean that, I'm not away. So yes, sorry, I started answering your questions before you've even asked me them.
Well, it's just, we talk about connection and the value of connection and those communities and how important they are. And then, we've been talking a little bit about health and just like we're not as young as we used to be, the exhaustion that sets in. and it's a pretty outward focused role in terms of, giving. And so I guess I'm just curious of like, if you could go back in time to your 25-year-old self and be like, hey, in a decade or so, you're going to be traveling, 150 days a year. What would you have told 25-year-old Alice, or what would you have
Buy a
told her
good
to focus on?
suitcase. No. Learn how to pack better. No, there is obviously more things than that. What would I say to 25-year-old me?
Take care of your knees.
Honestly, your lower back hurts. Look after it. You do not have to eat every buffet breakfast at every hotel you go to because most of them suck. I think it's about understanding your own time. Like, obviously, when I'm away for work, like I'm working, but it doesn't mean I have to be at every bar until closing every night
Mm.
because I also still have to do my job. 25-year-old me would definitely be very proud of how I use a calendar. I'm a queen of a calendar. My friends hate it because we'll talk about going for lunch and I'm like, I've just put it in your calendar. They're like, what the hell? I'm like, then you can't forget. No, I think for me, I would have told 25-year-old me to just be okay with slowing down a tiny bit. Like, we've known each other for almost half a decade now, and I am go, go, go all of the time. And I don't think I ever really valued like taking a step back in my own time until the last maybe 18 months ago.
Mm.
And I'm starting to sound old, but I really do value that. And I've set myself like a very good routine, right? So I get to the airport. I know where I like to sit in the airport in the lounge. I know what I like to eat. I know which airlines I do not eat the plane food on. I know
Mhm.
where I like to sit on the plane so that I might get a spare seat and that I can also sleep if I need to. I've worked out which airplanes have best or worst Wi-Fi because I fly a lot, and it's those types of things. And like different parts of work I can do, like if I'm on a plane, it's like I've worked out that like doing creative Club Suntory stuff is not when I'm on a plane. That's an admin time. But there are certain hotel types that, I'm like, if the like, like that kick off a creative process. Do you know what I mean? There's lots of those little
Mhm.
things that you
Mhm.
just learn about yourself. And one big thing that I would say is when you get to a city, 25-year-old slice, walk as far as you can at all times. Because not only will you learn the city and learn where it is, it just makes it feel so much more like home. And then
Mm.
you'll work out like the coffee shop or like the route back from the event and those types of things. And you just get to know a city so much better when you're on your feet than when you're in an Uber.
I love that. I used to try and have a rule that I like, or if I was arriving in a new city, I used to always try and arrive before lunch so that you had time to like orient yourself to the city.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, but and it's I wanted to pick up on the comment you made about, you don't have to go out till all hours when you are, because that's, I think, when you're in a rep job or you're in a brand job, it's really easy to kind of do your day job 9 till 5, 8 till 5, what have you, and then feel like, because of what your job is, because of, that's when actually so many of your clients and your customers and your colleagues actually now are going to work at,
Yes.
4 o'clock, to then be like, okay, now I have to go to the other half of my job, which is 4 till midnight. And yeah, it's unsustainable
Yeah,
mostly.
and I think this comes back to, the moderation, well, the conversation we were having before, but I think moderation can be key. What is key? Do you know what I mean? And yeah, I think my mindset is changing over time, which I actually am I like. But yeah, it's, traveling and being on the road and, when you're there, you want to be part of those communities and you want to show up and you want to support your friends and your customers and do all those things. But it should never, ever be to the detriment of you or the job that you're there to do. And, I want to get up in the morning and go and have a really nice breakfast in a cafe because hotel breakfasts are not my friend. But you know what I mean? But it's, and I think I'm never going to say don't go out to a bar because, there's a reason we do what we do. And, the nighttime economy is an incredible thing. And that's what keeps cities in the world rolling. But that doesn't have to be the be all and end all. Do you know
Mm,
what I mean? Yeah.
mhm,
You can
mm.
still go to those things and do all those things. It just doesn't have to be, yeah.
You
You
know,
know what I
without
mean?
Yeah, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Without wanting to, like, try and turn this into some sort of, like,
No, go.
dispensary of wisdom from the wise and old.
Hey, elder. Thank you. We'll go with elder
Elder,
emo over here.
elder, the elder wise woman that is Alice. I'm interested. You talked about your airport rituals, and I think, I so relate to that, because it's just like it's easier if you go to your spot, and heaven forbid you get to the lounge and somebody else is in your seat. Yeah, and
And if
then
there's
even
too
worse,
much of a line for that toasty machine, I swear to God.
there you go, and there's a Qantas lounge comment right there.
Yeah.
Bloody postie machine. But then I'm curious, it makes me curious, I think sometimes the transition when you've been on the road for a few days or a week, and then you come home, and that transition can sometimes be, almost confrontational. It's like, oh, how do you settle back down? So I'm curious, do you have a coming home ritual? Do you have a way that you settle back in, where you go, right, I'm turning down the lights, and now I'm home, and I get to go off the job now?
Yeah, and I think it's actually something that I do when I'm home anyway, because I have like my little rituals when I'm home. But so it's normally a Monday ritual if I'm in Sydney. But if I am just getting home, if I have nothing to do and I'm just going to be at home, I come home, I pretend like I'm going to unpack straight away. Let's be real, I know how I'm. Pretend like I'm going to get unpack. I'm like, that suitcase looks great there. And then I go to the gym. I then walk the 2Ks, whatever it is, to the supermarket. I buy my groceries. I walk home. I cook. I have a bubble bath and I do laundry. And then I go to bed and watch my stories, whatever insane 75 season TV show I'm watching right now is. And that's kind of what I do. That's also my Monday routine. I was talking to somebody yesterday, because I'd just been a bit unwell, and he was like, how many baths have you had? And I was like, I haven't had time, because that for me is like a really beautiful reset. And I'll go and I'll work hard at the gym, and then I'll do my walk, and then I'm either cooking for dinner for me and my housemate, I'll meal prep, whatever. Like, I really like the reset of cooking and being in my kitchen, and my housemate could be watching the footy on the couch, whatever. It doesn't really matter, but I really like that. If I'm in and I'm only home for a couple of days, I might go out to see people, because if I don't see my humans, I do feel that disconnect. And
Mm.
that's a really, really good way for me to reset, is to be, I guess, around with them. So then I would probably go and sit at one of my darling friends' best basement bars and enjoy probably a Manhattan or some type of delicious cold beverage anyway. But the point is about me, like, it's just about me reconnecting.
Mm.
I'm probably the most extroverted extrovert I've ever met, so I don't need too much alone time to recharge. And actually, if I spend too much alone time, it is the opposite of recharging.
Yeah, deflation happens. The battery is
Yeah,
depleted. Yeah.
100%. Being unwell is the worst for me, because then I'm sick, but then I have to be in a room by myself for longer, and it's like a cycle
The
of.
battery drains. I'm secretly proud of how many motoring metaphors we've been able to use today.
See, I almost just dropped another Buffy reference in there too. I'm really enjoying this. I'm like, how many times can I say Manhattan? And how many times can we talk about Buffy? But yeah, so I think that those are my two routines, and I try and walk to work the next day if I'm back in the office, because then I feel like that grounds me quite a bit.
Mm. Funnily enough, I do actually want to cycle back to, well, Buffy may come up in this, because with people who've been in the business a long time, I think the more you get used to having these conversations and to talking about, your inspirations, or what feeds you. And I'm often, I like to try and understand, for people who have developed some longevity, what is it outside of the industry that is shaping you, right? Because we can have an inspiring cocktail, we can go to a great bar, we can, but what are the things outside that actually inform or shape, whether it's, is it your inspiration, or a philosophy on how you want to live or be in the world, but what else other than, the industry is shaping
Things.
you.
I love live music. I try and go
Mhm.
to as many gigs as I can. A very good friend of mine was trying to do something like 52 gigs last year. I think he smashed it, and I was so jealous. See, I really like going to live music, but again, that's kind of a similar replica of this community, right? Like, you go and everybody's there for the same reason, and there's like a crescendo, and everyone's like.
Mhm.
I read quite a bit, which I also very much enjoy. I'm one of those, I think it's a normal thing to do. I've been told frequently that it's not. I will walk and read at the same time.
And how many lampposts have you met in that endeavor?
Never, but I did once walk into a bench, which was one of the most
But you're
painful
looking
experiences.
down.
Yeah, the book was in the way. I was also walking home. Like, I knew where I was going. And I remember thinking, the bench is going to come up soon. So yeah, I guess I read, I walk. I used to do a lot of, when I lived in WA, I did a lot of the City to Surfs, because my mum worked for the organisation that owned City to Surf. So that for me was, I think, something that I really liked, but I don't know if that was very inspirational. But I think I'm just really inspired by people.
Mm.
Corny point number two of the podcast is my mum is wildly inspirational. I'm very, very lucky. We're very close. And she is just a powerhouse of a woman. She's a CEO. She's run the New York Marathon. It's just, I can't even begin to explain how incredible and inspirational she is. And she's a really good barometer for me. So I feel smarter for every conversation I have with her.
Hmm.
And we will sit and we'll talk about, the very, very sexy and fun things of like corporate governance and things like that. Cause I used to sit on some boards and do you know what I mean? Yeah, I would say that it's my community of people. And most of them I will say are in the industry, but we don't just all sit around and talk about the industry. Do you know what I mean? We do talk about other things too, but I think outside of bars and restaurants and, those hospitality experiences, definitely the people that are around me that inspire me, whether it's creatives and writers or, yeah, or just people that get up every day and they do their jobs or, yeah, it's definitely the people for me.
Hmm.
I'm such a
Mhm.
hopeless romantic.
It's not hopeless. It's optimistic.
It is.
You're an
And
optimistic
I am
romantic.
nothing if not actually sadly quite optimistic. Yes, I am. I always assumed that I'd be quite pessimistic, but I'm not. I just want to see the joy in everything.
Yeah, no, that's all. I love that. So we touched on women briefly. It was kind of in reference to whiskey, I guess. But I am interested to know, because I think it's helpful and meaningful not just to always talk about kind of the activism of like, hey, here's how things should be, but for women like you and I who've been around in the industry for a while to actually have the opportunity to take a little bit of a temperature gauge to say, hey, so how do we think we're doing in terms of women in the industry, women in distilling, women in spirits, women in advocacy? We've come a long way. How are we doing, at the moment? What's the temperature gauge, from your perspective? What do you see? And then I guess with that optimistic lens, like, what's the next piece for us to achieve? What's the next, step towards making things better?
Look, I think we're in a space that we haven't been in. Like we're doing way, way better than we've ever done. Like if I look at like our team specifically, right? So we have the biggest advocacy team in the country, which is again, Chef's Crick is amazing. And up until, well, a couple of last week, we've just had a couple of internal movement pieces. Myself, House of Suntory, Maker's Mark, and New South Wales ACP State BA, and events manager and design manager, all women. 6 out of 10.
Amazing.
Amazing. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think I'm so, so privileged to have worked around some of the most incredible men in this industry.
Mm.
I would say some of my mentors, some of my best mentors have been men, but that also doesn't mean that there obviously wasn't some work to do. So there were other women that could have stood next to them as mentors. When I look at like my favorite bars at the moment, I would say 90% of them now have women in either like as leaders or in leadership teams.
Mm.
Which is again amazing because I think we're doing better as an industry to understand, and I'm not saying it needs to be a 50-50. It definitely does not need to be a quota because I'm not here for quotas at all.
That's the antithesis of authenticity.
Yeah. It's like I have to bring you here, so you should be here. No, I think the industry is just doing better at those things and, creating spaces across all things. Do you know what I mean? There's organizations popping up that are looking after men's mental health. Incredible, because that's a space that they've never really had support in before. And there are organizations, again, to go back to say Mix House or even like our whiskey that, the guys have started in the UK. Then it's just about creating a platform and a community for women to succeed and thrive so that everybody can be at the table together. And I think that's what's pretty incredible. We just did a kind of info panel session with Mix House when I was back in Perth recently about Suntory Cup. And it was just an additional session so that, all of the members of the industry who sit within female identifying, non-binary, and a space where they could fit, when, they could ask questions. And it was a really, really interesting conversation. I was hosting it with Pip, again from Mix House, and two bartenders that have taken part in Suntory Cup previously. One of them moved across the country because of the community she met in WA, which is pretty incredible. And the other one, they had won previously, and just about their experiences across kind of the competition scene. And I think people forget that everybody's experience is obviously so personal. But I think creating those spaces where everybody can thrive in a similar environment without being segregating is awesome. And I think that's something that we're starting to do really well. Is it's not a you can't come, it's that we need a space.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I love it. I like that. It's good. See, there's room for optimism. We can be optimistic. There are good things happening.
Yeah. But no, I think there is, right? And it's not an exclusionary space. It's just about, we need a space. It's like a men's shed. It's, it's not that, it's just about, sometimes people need a space. It is about their peers, it's,
Hmm.
and I think that is, if it's done well, which I think lots of organizations within the industry are doing well, it's just about getting people to feel like they can all be, that they all are ready and developed and they have a support network. I think that's what it's about. And I think there are some organizations and some people that are doing it really well. And I think that's another really beautiful side of advocacy, that like that, and that's, that's coming from within. That's, the trade doing it for trade. And
Mm.
I'm really proud of the people that are doing that. It's really beautiful to see.
Mm. I usually love to, as we kind of wrap up our chat together on this level anyway, the group chat lives on. But, I usually love to ask people like, what's their go-to staffy at the end of a shift. But it's a little bit different, I think, for the type of role that you have, but also, the tenure. And we've talked about some things that are about sustainability and longevity and like building health into, a career that, continues on. So I wanted to ask you, uh, in 10 years' time, what's the drink you want to be making and who do you want to be sharing it with? What does that look like in terms of the ongoing adventures of Slice?
So as we started with me asking a question that was obviously a one sentence question with about 17, I'm probably going to finish on something similar. So I don't know where I would be. Actually, where I was had absolutely no impact because it would be about who I'm with.
Mm-hmm.
But I can picture the table.
Mm-hmm.
There would be beautiful food that we'd cooked. I would probably be hosting. I want to say we'd be sitting, I mean, I can imagine the table right now. And there is 100% an array of Jim Beam martinis, but that's because it's me. There's that's never going. Even before I worked for Jimmy, that's what I drank. But it's about the moment, right? And if we were drinking cocktails, my housemate would be drinking a Sazerac. I would be drinking a Brooklyn. My best mate would be drinking a vodka soda with a dash of cranberry because he's awesome. Do you know what I mean? I could probably
Is that
pick
just
what.
like a cheats Cosmo, basically, at this point? It's
I
like
know,
a
but I'm
fizzy,
here for it.
Cosmo.
I don't know. I'm
Okay,
here for it. Yeah.
let's go.
Do you know what I mean? Like I can see what everybody has in their
Mhm.
hand, but I think the point is that we're all together, and I would really hope that we still have this incredible, ridiculous group of friends, and we're all lucky enough to hopefully be able to get into a room together in 10 years because life gets in the way. Long gone are the days of what we used to call Tuesday and Thursday book club. But I think that's what I would see for 10 years time. There'd be lots of really good food. We'd all be sitting around a table and we would be laughing so hard. We'd all be yelling over each other because that's who we are. We all learn our social skills making drinks in nightclubs, so we yell.
There is one volume, and it is loud.
And we have to be louder than Avicii. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I think that's what I see in 10 years is just a really beautiful community of people. Yeah.
I'm going to make your little heart happy
Oh.
and suggest that you should lock that in and put it in the calendar.
You know what? I will put it in the calendars. I will. Yes. And also, officially today, in 10 years' time, it will be my housemate's birthday as it's his birthday today. So we better all be in a goddamn room together. So, yes.
Perfect. I absolutely love it. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Tash. This was awesome.
I think it's so helpful to explore some of the other corners of life and observation and philosophy and ideas that shape, the work that we're doing when we're out and about. And I just really appreciate what you shared and your vulnerability on it. So
thank you so much. No, this was awesome to catch up, and I look forward to sharing in Manhattan in Sydney soon. Please.
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah.